Welcome to the Marshall Pruitt Podcast, your Week in IndyCar, a listener Q&A show coming out of Portland, heading into Milwaukee. This will be 3 race weekends in a row for those on the NTT IndyCar Series trail, going from Gateway to good old Portland to Milwaukee. Myself, same 3 weekends in a row, just stretching back a couple days prior with the Rolex Monterey Motorsports reunion. And yeah, awesome time in Portland. Been going there since I was a teenager. SCCA club racing, kart IndyCar, IMSA, support series, you name it. And yeah, love the place, always loved it. And this time did not disappoint. Thing that I enjoyed most is I spent a decent amount of time just in the paddock talking with friends about a lot of different things. And I don't know how many stories I wrote. I should probably count, but I feel like between everything that went up from Friday to Sunday, obviously including sidebars and normal stories and then session reports and all that stuff, I feel like I might have filed somewhere between 12 and 15 stories over 3 days. So hands were going quickly. We were typing a plenty, but also made a point to just spend a lot of time, I don't know, half hour, 45 minutes hanging out with my old friend and engineering mentor, Michael Cannon. Caught up with IndyCar president Jay Fry for, I don't know, maybe like an hour. Kyle Sagan, my friend Norm Hornacek from Air McLaren. It was his birthday on Sunday. He brought me, because, I don't know, he's just sweet and beautiful and kind, brought me an old Michael Andretti Lola Newman Haas windscreen, Kmart logos on it, like just gave that to me on his birthday. Like, buddy, we kind of got the order reversed here. I need to be giving you things, but just run down the list. It was a really enjoyable weekend. Somehow, while in Monterey for 4 or 5 days, flat out 12 to 16 hour days, texted with Dario Franchitti beforehand, like, hey, you going to be here? He said, oh yeah, great, we'll catch up. Didn't see him once, not even from a distance, and yet saw him at Portland. And I'm like, how do we miss each other for 4 or 5 days? And then we see each other first thing on Friday morning. So anyways, great to hang out with him. I don't know why I'm just running through a list, but our guy Chris Wheeler got sick Saturday night, as did a number of the Ganassi crew, so he was wearing a mask, but great to spend a little bit of time with him. Who else? Oriol Servia and one of his friends, his iRacing, one of his iRacing teammates, I don't know, spent a half hour with Oriol. Chuck Shifsky from Honda, probably a half hour with Chuck. So in between writing a heck a bunch of them word stories, also spent time just fellowshipping. Saw our friend Rooftop Ray, great camera operator. He was down in turn 1. That was fun. Spoke with Fro. This is a fun one. Spoke with our guy Felix Rosenqvist, I'm sorry. I missed the V on that one. Hadn't seen Fro all weekend. Was walking the grid for the race. Saw him. Saw me, motioned me over, saw him, gave him a hug. Love Fro. And, 5 minutes before climbing into the car, he's like, hey, did you see my launch in turn 1? He kind of messed up during, what was that, first practice, second practice, I think. Clobbered the inside armco, broke some things with the right front suspension, flew over the curbing, shot up in the air and came down. He was like, 92 G's. What? He said, yeah, man, 92 G's. Like, how are you still standing? Like, that was all compression, too. Anyways, he was like, I don't know. I'm okay, though. But they had to split the car in half, take the bell housing out. Ilmore took the energy recovery system / spec bell housing back to inspect that. Fresh one went in just to be safe. But, like, man, I knew it was a decent launch, but 92 G's, Fro. He's like, I know, it was a good one, huh? So Marcus Ericsson caught up with him. Like, it's just cool. Like, just it's nice after a long break and then also not being in Gateway. It was just cool. So definitely recharged a bit there. Pivoting to this weekend in good old Milwaukee. Was there in June for the hybrid test where Team Penske went 1, 2, 3 at that test, which has all of the non-Team Penske teams very scared about what we're going to find this weekend. Last time I was there for an IndyCar race was a kart race, I think, y'all. 2000-ish, 2001. I was still primarily covering sports cars when IndyCar was going there in the late 2000s. Went back in the mid-aughts. I forget why, but had conflicts where I was unable to make the return there, whatever it was, 9 years ago. So I haven't been there since we saw the 1,000 horsepower kart monsters. And I cannot wait to see what the new hot rods do here in full battle trim. So also gonna hopefully finally get to see some of the beloved Prude members. I think we have a Moral family birthday jaunt going on. Cassie Johnston and Craig Johnston should be there. Chrissy Pradena and just a bunch of amazing, beautiful people. So looking forward to that, seeing some folks. Good old Milwaukee, and then blast back here. We got chemo Tuesday, round 6. And what else? Yeah, a weekend off, then Nashville. Then I think I'm staying over because the weekend after Nashville, although that's the IndyCar season finale, the weekend after at Indianapolis, is a 6-hour IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship race, battle on the bricks. So, yeah, the season is supposed to be coming to an end, but it doesn't feel like it's happening anytime soon. All right, with all that said, please enjoy this brief messages. Messages? Yeah, actually, I think there are multiple messages, maybe. And then we'll come right back and get into the show. Time to say a big thank you to our show partners on the Marshall Pruitt podcast, starting with Pfaff Technologies, build-to-print composites manufacturing company. They're specializing in medium to large-scale automotive, motorsports, and military applications. Visit pfafftechnologies.com. It's Pfaff technologies.com to learn more about their services and how they can benefit your business. Next, it's the Justice Brothers, makers of premium additives, lubricants, and cleaners, and servicing the automotive and motorsports industries for more than 85 years, with victories in all of the biggest North American motor races, including the Indianapolis 500, the 24 Hours of Daytona. The Justice Brothers products are truly race-proven. Learn about their vast history and range of offerings at justicebrothers.com. If you're fond of awesome motor racing collectibles, including Pfaff Motorsports McLaren gear and goodies, pay a visit to torontomotorsports.com. And finally, we have a new online merchandise home for the podcast, thepruittstore.com. For all the show stickers, models, racing memorabilia I'm trying to sell and put towards our fund to buy a house is now live and rocking. thepruittstore.com. Thanks once again to all of our amazing partners. And also, speaking of thanks, huge thank you to our friend Jerry Sudduth, who grabs all your questions, puts them together, picks the ones that he thought were the best, and puts them in a entertaining order for us to enjoy. If you're looking to send in questions for the show, we got 2 ways to do it. The one that is certainly not the way to do it is to send them to me via direct message, because Jerry does not have access to my DMs. So my Marshall Pruitt X/Twitter profile will put out the call early each week. Just reply to that, or do the same if you are a Facebook person and prefer more characters to use. There's the Marshall Pruitt Podcast Facebook page. Look for the weekly call for questions and leave a comment there with whatever it is you might happen to have to say. And then we will do our best to get to as many as possible, as we will in this episode. So Jerry, who's been very kind in putting things together here with a little preamble, Says the series may have no more road races this year, but we have a whole lot more questions in need of answers. So we almost have 30 questions and around 1,500 words worth. They break down into the following categories. Group 1, Portland entertaining. Questions about penalties and race officiating. Oh, Jesus. Pole celebration policy. Can Alex Palou be caught? Will we see team orders at Milwaukee? Milwaukee test question. Who has the edge at the mile? Is there a cloud hanging over the season? What does it mean when a car has difficulty rotating through a corner? Group 2 questions, if we can get to them. Ed Carpenter racing troubles. Why no IndyCar race in Mexico? The Penske Ganassi dominance. Is that bad for the sport? And then the final group, which, boy, I'm going to have to push hard. These are all going to be qualifying laps if we get to group 3. The difference in watching a race on TV versus in person. How does pit stall selection work? And what the heck do I do during a race? And then Jerry leaves us with a funny quote, as he is wont to do. This coming from the great Milwaukee native baseball icon Bob Uecker. Said, I knew when my career was over. In 1965, my baseball card came out with no picture. Oof. Thank goodness there are no baseball cards of me, because they'd just be blank or way too heavy. One of the two. All right, our pal Steve Grinstead, you are opening the show, and I am going to try and do this in as many qualifying laps as possible. So please accept my apologies up front if I do not go crazy in depth on the individual questions in an effort to get to as many as I can. So as if you've had a chance to watch the race on TV, what did we not see that you saw in person? I don't want to call the race boring, but in ways it was. The lead changed, but no one could pass the leader. So I'm afraid it's going to be another follow leader race this weekend in Milwaukee. And as so many of you do, I tend to just read one of them per episode. Steve was super kind to say, best to you, your wife Chabrel, and the feline Pruitts. And I don't see any monkeys in here, so Rocky and Rosie are chilling elsewhere. Yeah, it was not particularly awesome. Might have been a month, 2 months ago, Steve. Someone wrote into the good old racer mailbag saying, hey, everyone says IndyCar racing's the best, but been putting up a lot of stinkers this year. Meanwhile, everyone says Formula One is trash and terrible, but they've been putting up some great races lately. Suck it, people who keep saying IndyCar is better than F1. And at the time, I responded by saying, okay, hey, right? We're talking about a couple of lame IndyCar races and a couple of good F1 races. Let's not yet proclaim any drastic victory by either, or one has now gone south and the other one is now winning. Let's get some more races in the books, right? Need a little bit more data. Steve, I'm feeling like we got enough data. It ain't working so well here. And it's one thing if we're talking ovals. We know the oval problem at Iowa. New track surface, tires were too hard, tires were not a match for that track surface. Can't really blame Firestone because they made those tires a long time ago. Yada, 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 yada. The Gateway race, way better than expected. I think that was one of the best races of the year. Had all the ingredients for it, though, right? Had cautions early, some more cautions that followed, opened up options for multiple strategies to be employed. And that way we got a bunch of folks kind of rising and falling throughout the race. It's really fun to watch. A lot of passing took place. Mid-Ohio, not great. First hybrid race, not great for sure. Wasn't a lot of passing. Toronto, I think by and large because of a decent amount of crashing. Plus, turn 3 is always really good for passing. Toronto street course is pretty darn good. But we have indeed had more IndyCar races this year that I think would fall into the category of not exactly super memorable than we're accustomed to. Can we put it all down to the hybrid? No. I think that's a little bit too much. The extra 100 pounds, not helping, right? We knew that. But between the extra weight, tires, sometimes races being cleaner than expected and not having those early cautions and or cautions at the right time to open up multiple strategies, we haven't been blessed with a lot of amazing, oh my gosh, pure thrills. So we went hybrid, it's 5 events now: Mid-Ohio, Iowa, Toronto, Gateway, and Portland. So I'd say we still need some more data. Milwaukee and Nashville are definitely going to give us all we need to know, whether them good or them bad. And the fear, like a Gateway, which thankfully didn't prove to be true, but the fear is Milwaukee's not going to be great. In Nashville, there's the same fear. I can't speak to that from having seen these things in front of my eyes during the most recent tests, but speaking with the drivers who are in the cars and engineers and otherwise, those are the fears that they harbor. So Portland definitely fell into the category of not being super awesome. Todd Murray says, I take issue with the avoidable contact call on Pietro Fittipaldi. Says when Scott Dixon was pushed onto the grass on the exit of turn 7, lost a bunch of momentum, looked to me that he faded right into traffic through turn 8 to, quote, stop the bleeding. It's funny, I just used that expression in a mailbag answer about 5 or 6 hours ago. While still carrying a minus 20 mile per hour delta compared to every other car. Seems to me that was the dangerous and avoidable maneuver, not the car scattering across apex curbs to avoid him. What say you? The only thing I don't jive with so much here is Dixon doing anything wrong. First lap, driven off track, given no room, however you want to put it, by Kirkwood. Not uncommon for a driver, any driver, to get back onto the track and try and, as you mentioned, stop the bleeding. Minimize the number of spots that they are losing. Did Dixon pull out like a parachute and just have everybody fan out behind him because he's dangerously slow? No, I didn't see that. Accelerated hard, did his best. It's a pretty slow corner to begin with that he was coming out of. So it's not like folks are firing through there at a high rate. He was just crawling. But no question, he was slower. But got back onto the racing line and accelerated away normally. I did not see him do anything that jumped out to me as like, oh, dude, you just wrecked yourself. The thing I took issue with was this, and this comes back to our friends in race control. So Dixon felt Kyle Kirkwood, our man, Kirk Kirkwood, Emo Kirk, was at fault, right? In his interview after the crash, said he felt that he's the one really who should have been penalized because it all started with him effectively running Dixon off the road. Ran Dixon onto the exit curbing at turn 7, and Kyle Kirkwood not given a penalty. Okay, got it. What did Dixon effectively end up doing? I think through no specific intent, right? I could be wrong, but you don't know because couldn't see his eyes, but I don't feel like it didn't seem like he was turning his head and seeing whomever, anybody behind him on the right and saying, I'm going to screw you and just move over onto the racing lot. It felt like Dixon was trying to accelerate away as hard as he could and created a situation behind him he might not have been fully aware was going on. Also, just oversharing here, drivers cannot see a damn thing out of their cars, to the side or behind them. It's not an excuse for Dixon. It's nothing new. I've said it on the show countless times, written it countless times. Just poor vision in general is an issue. I do not believe Dixon would have tried to do something underhanded to Pietro or anyone else. Just want to share that because Did Kirkwood intentionally give Dixon no room and run him onto the rumble strips and mess him up? I don't know. It doesn't seem super Kirkwood-like. Did he? Maybe. I don't know. But give him the benefit of the doubt. But the end result was it had a very negative effect on Scott Dixon out, being pushed onto the rumble strips. No penalty for Kyle Kirkwood, who, you could say, was the person that helped him out there. Who helped Pietro out onto the rumble strips and definitely screwed up his own race and Pietro's to some degree because of the penalty that followed? That'd be Dixon. My takeaway is this. If you don't penalize Kirkwood for moving Dixon out onto the rumble strip, then you don't penalize Pietro for being moved out onto the rumble strips by Dixon. You don't call one, then don't call the other. So consistency, friends. Inaction with one driver's movement, I would say inaction with the other, right? Nobody being called. Got it. Realized Dixon crashed, and that was his penalty if they did want to penalize him. But if the person doing the moving out onto the rumble strips was not worthy of some sort of bad decision by race control in the first incident, well, the guy who got moved out there, basically Pietro became Dixon in the interaction with Dixon. And in this case, he gets a penalty. That part I don't understand, Todd. I see it as a lack of consistency. Maybe I'm seeing it the wrong way. I could tell you, as the year has gone on, it does seem like whatever race control says is black, I think it's white, and vice versa. Like, it just, I can never seem to latch on to their train of thought. Doesn't mean they're wrong and I'm right. Just means that I continue to struggle to see things the way they do. Let's go on to B_C Walker, 1969. Herta stalled his engine in the pits and refired. The ability to refire should not have been available per rule in the pits. He was given a one-position penalty. Please explain the difference in that scenario from Will Power and Scott McLaughlin push-to-pass penalties. Okay, let's clean up a couple things first. Will Power, not involved in any of the push-to-pass penalties. I think there was a monetary fine, but no points. It was Joseph Newgarden and Scott McLaughlin. Nothing the least bit similar between firing an engine on pit lane and push-to-pass penalties. And I've had a number of folks mention this, ask, and so on, and I got to admit, if this is something that folks truly cannot see the difference between the two, that worries me more than anything. So, push-to-pass, not available for teams to use on restarts. Team Penske circumvented the rules, activated their ability to use push-to-pass at any time, did so multiple times at St. Petersburg when no one else had it available to use. The note about the ability to refire should not have been available per rule in the pits. The ability, that's the part here we also need to clean up. There was the ability for Colton and every other driver to fire their car on pit lane. IndyCar changed their approach to activating and deactivating the energy recovery systems while the cars are on pit lane. Number of problems in the first two races, Iowa specifically. Race control trying to manually turn the system on and off for each car as they came onto pit lane, left pit lane, turn it back on. Decided coming out of the event, you know what, we're just going to leave them on. Okay, we're not going to create problems for ourselves or some teams, right, where for whatever reason the messages weren't being received by the car, and Systems were not turning on, so we're going to leave them on at all times. Teams know, drivers know they are not allowed to use the refiring capability on pit lane. Apparently, this is not something that Colton Herta knew, because he said he was unaware. I know that I spoke with some other drivers after the race who did not know that, although it's illegal for them to do it, that they could refire their car on pit lane. That IndyCar had changed their practice from turning on and turning off to just leaving it on at all time. I don't know why I keep dropping the S off of that. General state of confusion is what I found among drivers, in particular after the race. Said they didn't think Colton would be able to do what he did, and explained to them, yeah, actually IndyCar just decided to leave the suckers on the whole time, but you're still not supposed to do it. Colton, apparently, I don't know if he knew or didn't know that they were being left on the whole time, but obviously was of the belief that he could and did, but shouldn't have. So the difference here, one team activated something they shouldn't have that no one else activated and used it to their benefit that no one else could. Herta's situation, they did not do anything to circumvent the rules, to use this system in a way that no one else could. Anybody and everybody on pit lane could and can, going into this weekend, refire their car. But they certainly now know, based on the Herta situation, that they should not, because they will indeed be penalized. So, no similarity here whatsoever in the how and why. There is one area, though, that I think is dang near identical, maybe completely identical, and it's this. We're talking about time saving, right? Time gain. Illegally using push to pass when you're not supposed to gives you extra horsepower, therefore gives you the ability to create more of a time advantage over the person behind you, especially when, in this scenario, no one else has it active. So you're able to go faster with more power than those pursuing you for the amount of time that you use that. Newgarden, I believe, I recall, used it 3 times at St. Pete. McLaughlin used it once, very briefly, said it was more of a mistake than anything else. That's a time advantage. Colton, using the self-starting function of the car on pit lane when he wasn't supposed to, was able to save a couple of seconds that would have been lost if he had waited, as he was supposed to, for a mechanic to grab the external starter, plug it into the gearbox, hit the button, spin up the motor, fire it, and send him off. So how they got to doing the illegal things, no commonalities. The difference on track / pit lane, whether it is gaining a time advantage over those who don't have the ability to match or neutralize that, in the case of the push to pass, or Colton, he still lost time because the motor stalled, but he minimized how much time he lost by doing the self-starting. It's still a time advantage compared to any other driver who might stall and then have to wait and have the longer manual restarting process take place. So I drop those into 2 very different buckets. I think IndyCar needs to go in one of 2 directions here, because the give up 1 position and ended up being about 5 seconds handing back of time didn't affect the outcome for him, really. Still finished 4th. You either need to make this a big penalty, so no one considers reaching for that button, that switch on the bulkhead to fire the motor on pit lane if you stall, drive through or something similar where it ruins your race, or as we get into next season, after crews and drivers and everybody has a lot more familiarity, I'd love to actually just see them allow it. I'd love for the cars to do self-starting at all times on pit lane. Hybrid. It's a capability. Use it. It's cool. Bringing this in halfway through the season, trying to be safer, not get crews kind of tangled up and trying to restart a car, but the driver being able to do it and folks being in the wrong position, miscommunication, get run over, I get why IndyCar said, nope, you can't do it. But I think after a half season, I feel like crews will have enough experience with it to where if IndyCar says next year, it's just going to be allowed at all times, I feel like that might actually be the smarter way to go. Why don't we go to Michael Steenblake? Says, MP, more of a statement than a question, but oh, the irony of, I didn't know you couldn't push the button moment from Herta. Ha! Also, we need an update on Rosie. How is she? She's doing okay. She's got some sort of calcium liver buildup thing. And so, yeah, there was fear. Had her annual physical checkup, whatever, blood drawn, and vet said, yeah, there's a couple of markers in her blood work that often indicate cancer. And so went in full ultrasound and scans. Her belly's still shaved, fur's growing back. But come back after the ultrasound and said, don't see any evidence of cancer anywhere. But we do see this going on with, some stuff we need to break up. So brought her in last week, actually, Thursday? Yeah, going to give her a monthly shot. That will help kind of break up whatever that calcification, or I don't know what it is. I'm forgetting what it is. But thank you for asking. She's doing well. She's her same terrorizing me and my wife, Cherbelle, and our older cat Rocky, being her normal self. So thank you, Michael. Spoke with Colton today, and I loved hearing him say, you know what, I'm good with the hate. If that makes people talk about IndyCar more, if hating me makes them happier, gives them something to chew on and debate, I'm all for it. And I got to admit, I quite respect his ability to process that instead of feeling some other kind of way. James Bethay says, I've never seen a more inept calling of a race than what race control did on Sunday. Please make it make sense to me as to what the F they were thinking about. Well, I need a little more than that, James. You got to give me examples. I'm with you. I know I've been saying this for a little while now, thinking it a lot longer, but we need a change. It's time. It's okay. You don't have to do any bad things. Don't have to say anything critical. Just say, hey, it's time, right? What do we hear often when there's a head coaching change? Locker room needs to hear a new voice, right? Let's go that direction. Need to hear a new voice. Probably use some new assistant coaches, right? There's some phenomenal people in race control who absolutely need to stay exactly where they are, and we would be in much worse case without them. But I would love to see a new head coach. Love to see some new stewards. That's what I was imploring Oriole to do in our conversation last weekend. Way too bright, way too smart, way too analytical, highly opinionated, someone who sees all sides of an argument instantly. He's had that ability forever. He's like, oh man, I don't want to be hated all the time. I'm like, look, you're talking to a guy who chose a job as a journalist where you're hated at all times, told you're an idiot, incompetent, and you don't know any, so yeah, I hear you. He's like, well, how do you get thick skin? I'm like, I don't know if I have thick skin. I just accepted the fact I'm stupid and idiot and I'm fat and I'm this and that. And I don't know the minute I just surrendered myself to, yep, everybody knows better than me, life just became a lot easier. He's like, oh, okay, I still don't know if that would work for me. I'm like, fair enough. But yeah, it's time. It's time. It is time. Darren Dubois, MP after Santino won the pole. He was ready to celebrate with his team at his pit box. IndyCar officials stopped them to wait to go to the performance pit box. What is that? Isn't it the NTT pit box or something like that? Curious what the policy is here. Seemed like it stopped a pretty good moment for the Foyt team. That is the structured place where it is meant to happen. So it's not uncommon for a driver who is on the pole to stop in their normal pit box first, but it's also not totally abnormal for that driver to head down towards that, whatever the official pit box is, where all the camera people and photographers, video camera, the TV folks, photographers and whatnot, announcers are waiting. So, the Santino wanting to get out of the car and kind of celebrate, and he did halfway get out, but it's not something they've had to do a lot of for a little while. And so it doesn't surprise me that, again, for a kid earning his first pole, for a team that hasn't been on pole for 10 years, like, this was a explosively awesome thing for them, and wanting to go straight to the pit box where his people are to celebrate with them, just totally a natural response by young Mr. Ferrucci. At the same time, you also have IndyCar official who's hearing in their ear, get them down to the official place, because there's not a forever open window of TV and radio, and got to make things happen in a relatively short amount of time. So that's why, instead of letting things play out naturally there was the urgency to get the car and driver and crew down to where the things are meant to happen formally. So got to spend time with Santino and Larry Foyt, and spoke with race engineer James Schnabel a little bit, and Anna Marie Finoro and Michael Cannon and Enrico, and just run down the line of all the awesome folks there at Foyt down in that NTT performance box, and they were plenty happy. There was no sorrow, and boy, something felt spoiled. They were like levitating off the ground. So it all turned out okay. Eric Franklin, do you expect team orders to coalesce around their best title shot starting in Milwaukee, or is that reserved for the final weekend? Realistically, it's probably down to Will Power and Alex Palou, but Colton has a puncher shot if things go wrong for the top two. Know that when I spoke with Tim Cindric, what was that, a week or two ago, about this very thing. It was coming out of Gateway. Like, hey, boy, I bet a guy named Will Power, who's your top dog, probably could have used all the points possible, and since his race didn't quite work out, Joseph Newgarden is a super long shot, and your boy McLaughlin much closer to title contention. I bet he could have used P1 points, and as Tim told me, he's like, yeah, it's a little bit of a hard thing to do 5 races out from the finale, or 5 to go, but I gotta believe here, Eric, that with Scott Dixon being knocked out, and I think mathematically he and McLaughlin and Newgarden are, I think, still all mathematically eligible, but no way in heck is it actually happening. If Ganassi does not have Scott Dixon in particular, and the rest of the drivers in help Alex Palou all you can mode, I will be shocked. They got one horse left in this race. It is Alex. Same for Penske. Again, McLaughlin is the longiest of long shots, so definitely would be surprised if Penske let a Power do anything other than finish in front of Newgarden and McLaughlin. If McLaughlin's running first and Power is running fifth or sixth, that might be a bit of an ask for Scotty to give up that much ground. But just say that if they're running anywhere near each other on track and Power is not ahead of his two teammates, he has a realistic shot of winning the title. Good Lord, I hope they do it. Lynn, formerly the Spurs fan. Does Will Power have a chance to win his third championship, or is Alex Palou just too darn consistent? So, yeah, Lynn, you kind of mentioned the thing here that's real. I'm just finishing up look at the Milwaukee points heading into Milwaukee and some realistic things. Let me read you the stuff that is most important. So Alex Palou has a 54-point lead over Will Power going into the Milwaukee doubleheader. Then obviously we have the final race at Nashville. We would say for sure Penske car's been better on ovals this year, especially short ovals. Here's the part where some unique things have to happen. So for Will being 54 points back right now, he needs to pick up about 18-ish. Let's just go with 20 points, just so it's a bit of a safe margin. He needs to pick up about 20 points more than Palou at each of the next three races, right? Obviously, if Palou crashes, has a motor blow once or twice, you name it, Will and Colton and whatnot can erase that gap, shoot right up there, really make this crazy tight. If things go somewhat normally, no major crashes, no major motor problems, pit lane issues, if it's just a straight up race between Power and Palou over these next three races, Will's going to need to gain, again, 18, we'll just call it 20 points at each of those three races to get ahead of Palou. Well, he can do that if he wins and Alex finishes no better than fifth at each of those three races. If Will finishes second across those three races, Alex only needs to finish, no, I shouldn't say only. He'd need Alex to be 10th or worse at each of those races in order to get that done. So all of a sudden, okay, if it's three straight wins, he needs Palou to be no better than fifth or so at each of those three. He's the champion. Even just going back to second, 3 second places, Lynn. Palou, again, you realize he's got to do a little bit better than 10th, but that lightens things up pretty easily. If Power is third at each of the three remaining races, Alex basically needs to, well, he'd need Alex to be 15th or worse. Not impossible, but here's the part that I just want to leave you with, and we'll move to the next part. Will Power is dealing with the king of consistency. So I'll just read you this little passage, and then we'll move on. From 14 races completed this season, Palou has 12 finishes of fifth or better. Said another way, Palou's only had 2 poor results from 14 tries. That's a top 5 delivery rate of 86%. It's the crushing consistency that makes him a perennial title threat and someone who rarely accommodates the needs of those who want him to have one bad race after another. Here's the other thing that we have to keep in mind. So we're talking about the, hey, Penske cars and drivers are the masters on oval. Palou, he's a road and street course guy, right? He had that crash, that solo crash of his own at the first Iowa race, his fault. That was his worst finish of the year, 23rd. That's really the only bad finish that he's had, and that happened to be on an oval. But keep this in mind about the rest of his ovals this season, the other 3. And this is, again, just reading this little passage here. He was 5th at the Indianapolis 500, crashed at the Iowa 1 race, but shook it off and rebounded the next day to take 2nd at Iowa 2 and placed 4th at the last oval at Gateway. And yes, he is still chasing his first oval win. But keep in mind that those 3 races that he finished, the one where he didn't crash, his average oval finishing position is 3.6. Alex finished every oval race in 2023 and did so with an average finish of 5th. So, Lynn, just saying, will have a chance? Of course. Colton have a chance? He does. We just need extraordinary things to happen to our guy, Pelot, who's a member of the Prude listener group, by the way. If you are not a Pelot fan and or a bigger Colton or Power fan, you need things to happen to Alex that do not normally happen. Bad stuff, crashes, misfortune. The issue here is for Will and especially for Colton, they need distance between where they finish and where Alex finishes. As we just mentioned, his average oval finishing position this year from those 3 of the 4 where he's gotten to the checkered flag is 3.6. Last year across the 5 ovals, his average result was 5th. It's that part that just breaks your back, Lynn. So to make this happen for anyone other than Pelot, you are praying for cartoon anvils to be raining down on him. If things go anything like they normally do for him on ovals over the last couple of years, where he is very good, not a winner yet, but always in and around the podium, that is going to be kryptonite to those who are pursuing him. Ed Joras says, as I recall, none of the Ganassi cars were around the Milwaukee Hybrid Open Test. Did the team ever get a makeup date? They did, along with Juncos Hollinger Racing. So yes, they did. Would it be an advantage or disadvantage to do the test a few weeks later? Don't know. In theory, if there was still rubber down from the previous test, that'd be a great thing. The fact that it's Milwaukee, I don't know, I feel like it might have rained at some point in time in between. But yeah, the Ganassi team was focused on what they were at Le Mans, busy somewhere in and around there. So that is why they were unable to go there when everyone else did. JJ Gertler says, with all the changes since the last race there, is there any real advantage to drivers and or teams who've driven Milwaukee before? And if so, who's going to hire defending race champion Sebastian Bourdais? Yeah, without a doubt. The OGs, the Graham Rahalls, the Will Powers, the Dixons, who've been there, and Joseph Newgarden, they know how a race can play out. It's not necessarily going to be in single lap speed, right? Any good IndyCar driver, oval experience, is going to know how to find the fast way around there. It's more the case of rhythm. Got 200 miles, 200 laps, however many it might be of experience from this race or that race, knowing how things can play out, how second grooves may or may not work, and just, yeah. So it's that institutional knowledge more than anything, JJ, that should help the vets who've been there. Steve Bonnick, how you doing? Say hello to your dear family for us, please. So it seems like there's a cloud over this year's IndyCar season. Cheating allegations, wind stripped, many pissed off drivers each race, lots of middle fingers. Thoughts on why? So see you in Milwaukee. Well, I'm super happy to hear that, Steve. Does it feel like McLaren is responsible for at least half of this? Yeah. It nosed over pretty good at Long Beach, didn't it? Feels like that's where things really went not great. Do we even back that up a little bit to our guy, Lil Dave, Davey Malukas, hurting himself preseason, being unable to race? That kind of spin the wheel of who's going to replace him from a weekend-to-weekend basis. We also had, I'd been sitting on this for a long time, but broke this during the St. Pete weekend, I think as well, the fact that IndyCar team owners had banded together to bring their shared concerns to Penske Entertainment. That hasn't happened in forever. Team owners uniting, kind of, I don't know if against is the right way to put it, but rising up, that was going on. So there's a little bit of agita there. Whole cheating thing that broke Sunday morning at Long Beach with Penske drivers, that whole saga going on there. A mannequin trying to commit suicide. All kinds of crazy stuff. Get into the month of May. A little more silliness going on for sure. It feels like things have been going for a while. So I'm with you. Hybrids, nobody loves them. 0% people love the hybrids. I can't find a driver who truly is like, this is the coolest thing. Like, some of them are like indifferent. Oh, actually, it's all right. It's cool. No real opinion one way or the other. Most will tell me they hate it, can't stand it, does nothing, / just makes the car handle worse. Engineers hate it. And that's just from the inside, a small sample. The amount of fans who want to burn the hybrids with fire and make them go away, and probably the aero screen at the same time, and go back to 2019 spec or something like that. There's all that. There's race control, which is just stepping on their appendages seemingly multiple times per race. What else am I forgetting? The hate cauldron thing. I didn't catch that segment, by the way, but that seemed like it was a little bit of a stretch from what folks were telling me of that thing getting drummed up again. But how's this? Calm season of racing and natural flow happening for fans to follow true, amazing, dynamic teams and athletic drivers showing who's best, and drama just happening in and of itself. Not a lot of that. People grumpy about every damn thing on track, off track, between track, just you name it. Yeah, so I'm with you. It's been a cloudy season, Steve. I don't like these. I didn't get into racing because of nonsense and drama. Got into it because of cars and drivers and cool stuff. So, yeah, hope we just get back to that at some point in time. Steve Luke says, after qualifying at Portland, Dixon mentioned having trouble getting the car to rotate through the turns. I've heard this before, and I'm curious what specifically he's talking about. Is it the yaw the car through the turn, or what is he referring to? Well, could be a couple, could be a lot of things, Steve. So that rotation, Dixon is a driver who prefers the balance of the car. Got the 2 front tires, 2 rear tires, big wing up front, big wing in the back. Prefers the balance of the car to be tipped on its nose. He likes a nose-heavy car. Doesn't like one that is super oversteery. A nose-heavy car, different than one that is like super Tokyo Drift. For him, he wants the front of the car to be heavily loaded with weight and reaction. Weight from downforce or just mechanical grip. When he touches the steering wheel entering a corner, he wants the front of the machine to rotate rapidly and aggressively. It's different from a driver who prefers understeer, likes the back of the car weighted more than the front, and doesn't necessarily want the front of the car to snap in an instant when they touch the steering wheel. Could the car Dixon was referring to, keep in mind there's a lot of different corners, slow speed, high speed, medium speed, so there's no single answer for any of this, Steve, but effectively what he's talking about is not being able to get either the front of his car to rotate as quickly when he turns the steering wheel, doesn't shoot in the direction he's aiming for, or the rear of the car being a bit lazy and slow to react and carve and get with the program and follow the front. So talk about a lot of reasons why, whether it is the center of pressure aerodynamically, could be tire pressures that weren't exactly amazing, could be cambers, could be toe settings, could be anti-roll bars, could be springing, damping. There's a lot of reasons why it might not be rotating to his liking through the turns, but for a guy who wants immediate reaction from the front, if it's not doing that, he's going to say, hey, really having trouble getting the car to rotate because it's just not going where he wants as quickly and as aggressively as he prefers. Where are we at time-wise? Okay, let's see if I can rock through the final questions here now in Group 2 and Group 3. Chris Hoffman, what's going on at Ed Carpenter Racing? Is it time for Ed to retire? Do Renus and ECR need to go their separate ways so they can both flourish? Yeah. Take away a lot of silly little things that have gone wrong with Renus's car this year, and he's in a much better position. Do I think it's time for Renus to move on in general? Yes. I think he has become as good as he's going to get with what ECR has to offer. There aren't many young drivers that I can think of who have spent as long. I think this is his 5th year possibly with ECR. For a young driver to spend as many years with a good midfield team as he has, you normally have moved on by now, if you have the talent, and he does, to a bigger / better team. And again, this isn't criticizing ECR. It's just they've been a really good midfield team for many, many years. This kid's learned as much as he can in that midfield station. If he has more to offer, can be better, I don't expect him to be able to show that without moving on to a bigger and better team to take him to that next level. If we're talking about college or something like that, it's like he's spent 5 years as a freshman and maybe sophomore and needs to go someplace where he can learn what you would learn as a junior, maybe even a senior, and see if he has what it takes to really graduate towards the top of his class. So if he were to go somewhere else, and I'll admit I'm not totally sure where that somewhere else would be right now, it does seem like ECR has a really good young talent to grow in Christian Rasmussen if they don't look elsewhere. I do have ECR as a potential fallback for our guy Alex Rossi if he does not land at Prema, which I don't think he will unless things have changed. Ray Hall Letterman Lanigan Racing is the other that told repeatedly by folks last weekend that's certainly a hot button place of potential for him. If those two do not happen, knowing how close he is to Ed, just as friends, but also, holy cow, this guy brings crazy skill and knowledge to a team that can benefit from it. Yeah. If not somewhere else, boy, I'd love to see him pair with ECR because ECR, without a doubt, moves forward on the grid. As for Ed, I don't have an answer. When he was in a third car, I don't know if he had the best of everything around him from a engineering standpoint. Now that he's been back sharing the primary car, got some of the smartest, best people you could ask for on the engineering side, and it's just been rough for him. So I don't know what it is, Chris, when it comes to Ed specifically. Don't want him to retire. Never want to see someone as good as Ed retire after too many years of frustration and lack of results. But if things don't turn around the next couple of races for him, he's told me he's coming back next year, so awesome. But You also don't want to see folks just routinely disappointed if you realize, man, I keep beating my head against the wall and things don't get any easier. You do wonder if they realize maybe it's time. John Wojnar, how you doing, John? John, who I routinely credit for founding the Prue Day, even though he tells me that's not accurate, but that's okay. Rumor has that NASCAR has a date lined up for a Mexico race. Yes, confirmed today. With how often Mark Miles has said it's a possibility of getting a date for years with an extremely popular and talented driver from there in Pato Award. Got to ask, what is the holdup of getting said race date done for IndyCar? If NASCAR does get a date before IndyCar, do you think maybe Roger should ask for resignations from a few of the higher-ups? We're fumbling a great opportunity in a potentially healthy and hungry market. Oh, boy. I don't want to take too long on this because we're at the end of the show, but not a surprise that NASCAR is going there because NASCAR is a giant organization with far more fans than IndyCar. And I don't know how popular Daniel Suarez is compared to Pato. I just don't know. But they certainly have a driver who's pretty darn popular. Here's the thing I'd be concerned about. Someone asked me about this a day or two ago. Hey, Arrow McLaren, great relationship with Hendrick, right? Hendrick Motorsports. Hendrick Motorsports aligned with Chevrolet. Arrow McLaren aligned with Chevrolet. Thoughts of putting an extra Hendrick affiliated, again, I don't pretend to know all the rules of NASCAR, if they could, or charters, or again, I have a feeling that however it needed to happen, if a Pato Award making a guest appearance at in a Hendrick Cup car at Mexico City were floated, that NASCAR would say heck yes, and I'm guessing our friends at Arrow McLaren would certainly not stand in the way. Only thing I don't know, John, I haven't seen if they announced an actual date and if it would conflict with an IndyCar race or not, but if there is no conflict, the smartest thing NASCAR could do and Arrow McLaren and Hendrick could do would be to put an extra car in the grid for Pato and say, hey, the main series you guys are in, for whatever reason, can't get their bleep together, but here's a kid who is wickedly popular, and you want to make some new NASCAR fans out of IndyCar fans? Be sure to tune in at Mexico and watch our guy, Pato Award, drive the wheels out of a Chevy Cup car. I think that'd be phenomenal. So I don't know why we aren't going. Usually if you want to make a thing happen and you are a company like Penske Entertainment that has wealth, has reach, has reputation, you can make things happen. And when they don't, you sometimes have to wonder how hard do you want to make something happen. Taylor Solmos, Marshall, curious to know your thoughts on the Penske and Ganassi domination of IndyCar race wins. It's nothing new by any means, but most of the time it looks like driving for one of those two teams gives you a 1 in 7 chance of winning. Is this something that's bad for the growth of the sport and possibly hurting the fan perspective? I don't know from the fan perspective because I come to the sport or look at the sport and work in the sport in a different capacity. But if you are a Formula One fan, you are very accustomed to Red Bull and Mercedes being the dominant teams. Been that way for super long time. Super long time. Lately, awesome, right? McLaren raising up, flexing. That's been great. Love seeing this bit of unexpected challenge that's going on. And I know we've had some other teams sneak in there, Ferrari obviously, but there's been some fun like, hey, look what's going on. The real issue here is this, Taylor. This car has been around since 2012. It's been through many iterations, lots of evolutions. Got this new hybrid thing. So you go, well, boy, that's a big new one. True. Who are the two teams that did more hybrid testing than anybody? That'd be Penske and Ganassi. Pretty much everything else on the car, been around for a long time. Again, each of these evolutions of that DW12, none of them go away after a year or two. It's usually 3, 4, 5 or longer. And so it's the duration here. The two biggest and best funded teams with the best drivers / personnel with many, many years in whatever configuration of the DW12 have attacked it, looked for every little area of improvement and gain. And because they are bigger and because they are better than all of the rest, they find more, they have better processes, they have sharper minds. Again, I'm talking on average, than those who pursue them. Throw in some devastating drivers, consistency of a Will Power, Scott Dixon, Alex Palou, Newgarden, McLaughlin. It's why a lot of these other teams are fighting for third place at best, if not farther back. So you could say, but wait a minute, they change cars every year in Formula One, but we still have either Red Bull or Mercedes dominating over the past 10, 15 years. And you go, yeah, it's true, but they're also truly much bigger and much better. And although the cars change year to year, a lot of the designers do not. So you have these evolutions where they just make a base idea better the next year and better the next year, maintain an advantage. So I don't know if it's hurting things from a fan perspective. I just tell you that it is an equal opportunity sport. And Andretti Global, when I said the Penske and Ganassi teams are the best funded, I got to walk that back. You know, the rumored investment from Group 1001 and that whole thing on the Andretti side is said to be $250 million. I don't know how much they're spending per year, but on the IndyCar side, but I can guarantee you it's not a small amount. Arrow McLaren as well, I understand them to be spending more per entry than Ganassi's spending per entry. They got a bunch of great people. They got a bunch of things, and yet they keep coming up short. So, you know, like F1, like whatever other series, equal opportunity to do better. But top two haven't been toppled in a really long time. The last non-Ganassi or Penske champion was 2012 Andretti Autosport back then, Ryan Hunter-Reay. Every single championship since 2013, Team Penske or Ganassi, Scott Dixon, Simon Pagenaud, Alex Palou, Will Power, Joseph Newgarden. If I've forgotten someone, I apologize. But, yeah, Dixie in 2013, 15, 18, and 20. Power in 2014 and 2022. Palou, 21 and 23. Simon in 2016. Joseph in 2017 and 2019. So I apologize if I've forgotten a year in there. But, I mean, it's like a tennis match of the championship volley going back and forth between these two teams. And I'll admit, I would love for someone else to get in there. Colton Herta, go get yourself a championship, man. That'd be phenomenal. I would love to see that. Not because I want to see Penske or Ganassi lose, but just variety, please. All right, last couple quick ones here. Colin Young. A lot is made on NASCAR broadcasts of pit stall selection and how important it is to be able to select the best stalls. I never seem to hear about an IndyCar, though. How do teams select their pit stalls? How do you feel being at one end or the other is a benefit? Unless things have changed, I seem to recall it is based on qualifying at the previous race, the previous matching race. So what? We had Scott McLaughlin on in P1 here at Portland, and I'm just checking here real quick because I'm probably wrong, but who was on the pole at the last road course. Well, it wasn't Scott McLaughlin. He was on pole at Gateway. So I thought it was like for like, meaning whoever was on the last road course or street course pole would be on the P1 on pit lane for the next road street course, but I'm wrong. Scotty was on pole at Gateway, and he was P1 there in Portland, and then P2, P3, and so on. And then obviously whomever is last in the championship and or an addition for the race, like we had with Yuri Vips, would be all the way at the opposite end at pit in. How do I think it affects things? It doesn't, unless we have everybody pitting at the same time, and then we can have some mild oddities. What does that mean? Sometimes you will have a midfield or tail end team have a really good qualifying run, driver, I should say, within those teams. And it's great for them. Team might not be rockets on pit lane, might not be accustomed to being up front in that constant battle with the fastest pit crews, doing things the best, fastest, most efficient ways. At times, it's not super often, but at times, Colin, you can have a team that doesn't really live among the monsters of pit lane, up and among them because of their qualifying position at the previous race. And are they a little slower, or does it take a moment longer to get the car in or out of the box? If you have a bit of a crunch time with everybody pitting at the same time, a little bit of an outlier with some of those unaccustomed to being here entries might slow one of the faster drivers from getting in or getting out just because of them taking a little longer and or equipment maybe not being in the exact most efficient place. Ty Schlorer. It's just me as Honda teams had more engine change penalties this season than in past. I don't know if it's more, but it sure feels like it's a lot, and it feels like it's not too far from what it was last year, Ty. Also, thanks for sending in a question. I could be wrong, but feels like it might be the first or among the first times you have sent in questions. Colin, you're back with one more question, I think. Let me just double check. Yes, you're back with one, and I think we will... let's see, Renee Davis, you're asking, wondering when the final warm-up day of the race stopped. Last two races I've noticed that, and was wondering why it changed. Saturday, for example, they had a 5:15 to 5:45, quote, final warm-up. I think with the earlier start at 12:30 on Sunday, plus an Indy NXT race to do before that. I like the idea of that all getting done and crews getting a chance to get some proper rest, and not everybody had to be in crack of dawn Sunday morning. So I actually like that a little bit. Jaime Macias, you're asking about his IndyCar lost the tag of being the best racing product in the world. Talked about that a little bit earlier. It is, we're on the clock. That could indeed happen. Why don't we go with Colin says, what does my favorite IndyCar journalist actually do during a race? Well, first of all, which journalist would that be? Because it should be me. I'm not kidding. He says, are you on pit road or in the media center? I assume you're doing more than just watching on TV like the rest of us, but I'm curious if the actual race is kind of downtime for you. Very quickly, I am mostly in the media center. Why? How is that anything particularly great? It isn't, but it's actually the best information hub. So if you look at my race reports for Racer, I do a bit of a running as it happened or what is happening style, and I leave that in the reports, and that's below the recap of the race itself. Lap 42, Will Power has a 4.2 second lead over Palou. So-and-so did this, so-and-so pitted, and or this thing happened. Lap however many later, gap's been drawn down to 2.1. Well, that comes from watching timing and scoring and watching the race and trying to present a as it happened type narrative. So that would be very hard to do out on pit lane or out on a corner. Back in the day when I used to do a lot of photography and supplying my own words and images, I'd have headset on. I think that was like pre-earbuds being really popular, and trying to listen to the race. I'd sometimes have a scanner, listen to the NBC broadcast, and trying to remember stuff or take notes on my phone, get back to pit lane before the race was over, and then fart all that out into a story. But stopped doing that a while ago. There's a cool thing I'll just mention as the last item here. It's not available to the public, but there is a timing and scoring screen provided by IndyCar Timing and Scoring, piped into the media center. It's always also, you can see it some other kind of internal spots inside the track. Not really, it's not meant for fans, I guess. It's not presented for fans, but it has many of the same things you see on the regular timing and scoring on an IndyCar app or on their, if you're using a browser or something like that. It's more or less all that same info, but there's some other really cool things that aren't on it, where a dedicated little box of running passes, who's has the most and in what order, top 5 or something like that. Could be fastest laps. Could be the thing that I love most, that I am constantly watching, is points as they run, right? And so watching that to see how things are tracking there, how a power is getting closer to Pelot or whatever it might be. I don't know if I have a photo of the full screen, because I usually just take a photo of it sitting however far back in the media center I am. I should try to sit towards the back. I don't know why, but that's just a me thing. But we'll take photos of that and use that to help me as I start writing my race report, because it'll take who knows how long. Could take a little while to get those reports out of IndyCar. Not crazy long time, but it's good to have that info. But trying to remember, Colin, at some point in time to take a photo of the timing and scoring screen made available to us that I love, that helps me stay informed from start to finish through the race. So last thing on this, with the race being not super exciting and no changes anticipated, I actually wrote my race report before the race was over. Started writing it, which is not totally uncommon when it looks like things are going to go the way they're going. Of course, there could always be a change, but it looked like Power had the thing locked. That last pit stop, he was a man on fire, pulling out a big lead. I'm like, okay, either something blows up, someone runs into him, or he's got the thing won. And I don't think any of those things are going to happen. So I can start writing the race report. And I did. And what I wanted to do is get down to pit lane to interview the fun little Kiwi known as Marcus Armstrong. So I filed the race report, I feel like, I think Will might have just rounded the final corner and was heading towards the checkered flag when I hit send on the race report, with a little note saying, when I get back, I will add in some quotes from Will and or whomever, but here's this to run. And off you go. Because I wanted to get down to pit lane, because obviously they hold on to the drivers who are on the podium, but for the others, sometimes they can scurry away pretty quickly. So grabbed Marcus, got some fun quotes from him. Also said, hey, I'm not asking you where you're driving next year, but I've heard that within the last couple of days, that has been confirmed. And to which he said, and I didn't get the reference at the time, but he said, if I'm ever kidnapped, I want you to be the detective who tries to find me, which was his way of saying I had solved the mystery or something like that. I don't know. Love him. Strange kid, but love him. That was fun. Then also wandered down and spoke with Pato O'Ward, who was not happy, but justifiably so. And I'm forgetting who else. I spoke with one or two other drivers, but just trying to get out the door, Colin, so I can get down, get some quotes for stories and get those going as well. And so, yeah, that's the answer. I'm often watching the same thing as you, not so much for the pure entertainment side, but because I need to absorb information in a controlled environment. They also have the race shown, whether it's big screen TVs or projected. Probably should have mentioned that. So watch the whole thing. Great timing and scoring information, great points as they run, who's doing a lot of passes, who's doing everything else. And that helps inform what I end up manufacturing for y'all. Okay. Thank you for listening. I'm going to shut up. I'm looking at my to-do list. I have my ESPN column to try and finish. Spoke with Tim Cindric a little earlier, giving flowers to Will Power. Will I have a silly season update done before I head to Milwaukee? I don't know. I got 2 calls to make in the morning, but yeah. Spoke with Marcus Erickson today. Got a story to do there. Let's say 2 things to say farewell. First of all, congratulations to our truly dear friend and longtime listener, Lawrence Cunningham, sent through a photo and a note here that, I'm so happy for him. His daughter Grace, graduating Navy boot camp, number 1 in her group. Says he's so proud of her, and I'm right there with you, Lawrence. That is just, look at the big, he sent through a great photo of her, and she is just smiling as happy as can be. So congratulations to you and your amazing wife and your daughter Grace. Let's say farewell with a little bit of a sad note. If you are familiar with the Indianapolis 500 on-site, Greater Central Indiana, you will know Chucky. Good old the Wolfman. You will know about Chucky the Wolfman Lynn. And screaming the word paper at the top of his lungs for decades, selling papers, Gasoline Alley, and anywhere else he can inside the Speedway. Beloved member of the greater IndyCar community. Spent his life dealing with and often succeeding in the fight with cerebral palsy, and just a character, just a sweet, sweet man. And he died today, as I was told, and spoke with IMS president Doug Bowles, also longtime lover of Chucky. I mean, anybody and everybody who knew Chucky loved him, gave him a hard time, give you a hard time back, knowing that he's dealing with far more difficulties just to live a single day of his life than any of us. There's always great love and care given to him. Doug mentioned this, and I'm writing I don't know if it's an obituary or what it is, but I don't think I bought a $1 Indianapolis Star newspaper off of Chucky for anything less than $20 ever. And I was probably paying on the low end. Seemingly every mechanic, team owner, driver, series official, Chucky never had any papers left over because folks bought all of them, drastically overpaid, all to try and put extra money in his pocket. Also knowing that the month of May, of him riding around on his custom trike, shouldn't say team owners, usually whether it's a team manager, chief mechanic, Ziggy, for example, Paul Ziggy Harkis was a great giver and lover of Chucky. Would take a tricycle, bike, or whether it's make one or modify one, put a big enclosed box on the back where Chuck could store his newspapers. Sometimes those would get airbrushed and all done up, or get done up with stickers and flames and you name it. Give him something cool to ride around in. Chucky, some physical deficits as well to deal with, but he's just someone who, if you are from a certain era of IndyCar, Indianapolis 500 like myself, and I'm guessing thousands of others, you know that voice, you hear that voice yelling paper at the top of his lungs, and you go out and you buy a paper to give him a hard time, give it right back, and just someone who made IndyCar in the Indianapolis 500 so much better for his presence. And knowing that the month of May was really the one big time of the year where there were tons of us there, it was also the opportunity for folks to pay $5, $10, $20, $50, whatever it was per day for a newspaper to really help him during this one big month per year for him to generate as much income as possible. So, hadn't seen Chucky the last year or two and was honestly worried about what might have happened to him. So very sad to hear that it was in assisted living scenarios, I was told today, and did indeed pass. So a lot of love to Chucky. Made a lot of folks laugh. Made a lot of great friends. Tony Kanaan, AJ Foyt would give him the business. Tony Stewart, just run down the list. That was part of the tradition. So yet another Indianapolis Motor Speedway tradition gone. Chuck the Wolfman Lynn. Gonna miss him, and so thankful to have been there and gotten to know him a little bit and experience him for as long as I was able to, many, many decades. So that is our show. We will have another one for you soon after Milwaukee. Apologies in advance on timing. Won't be getting home until Monday afternoon. We have chemo Tuesday morning, and that's going to take most of Tuesday. So will do my best to get the call out for questions as soon as I can once I get home, but don't be surprised if next week's episode is more of a Wednesday or Thursday thing, just due to life. So thanks, y'all. Thanks once again to Pfaff Technologies, TorontoMotorsports.com, and the amazing Justice Brothers. We'll speak to y'all soon.